So this is Skip with the WSGF. I'm going to take what is hopefully a quick look at the LG 43UD79 that I've just received in the last day or so, set up today and run through a quick Spyder testing. So this is again a quick look and a quick comparison to the month or so that I spent with the Dell 43-inch option. I know that the LG here has gone on sale on Amazon, maybe to coincide with Prime Day or something, and there's some folks on YouTube asking for my thoughts or inputs, or if I've had to play with the panel yet. And this is a very, very first look. It's not a final review or take on it, so take everything with a grain of salt, and we'll jump in and hopefully get out of this quickly. I'm trying to do it all in one take. This is my third try. The first two I think have ran too long for what anybody's going to listen to, so we'll see if we can get this one under the belt quickly. First thing I'll say is that the box that the unit comes in is much smaller than the Dell box. It's much lighter. The whole thing is easier to manage. The panel itself, the stand, is all easier to manage. So if you're setting it up by yourself, that is a good benefit there. If you want a wall mount, I've got an Ergotech 7Flex HD here, which has a 75 and 100 millimeter pattern built in. The LG will wall mount, but it requires a 200 millimeter pattern, so you'll need an adapter if your wall mount doesn't do 200. While this may cost you a few extra dollars, I think it's probably a good thing. The wider footprint for the connection, I think, will make the adjustments easier and make you a little less fearful of potentially breaking the panel or causing any damage. I know when I was adjusting my Dell, it felt like I was rotating and pushing against a very small pivot point, and it always just caused me to inhale sharply every time I did it. So hopefully a larger footprint will help with that. The LG comes from the factory tuned. They try to tune you here to 6500 Kelvin with a gamma of a 2.2. This is the printout from my particular monitor. You can see here the color temperature, the variation. They try to keep it very consistent. And then again here, the color difference, the delta E on the color response. They say anything under 5, it's hard to figure out between the reference color and the tested color. And they test all their grayscale steps here at less than 1. So we'll look here at the Spyder testing. This was all done at the default out of the box settings. That may not be the best sort of gold standard to test by, but most people are going to get a monitor out of a box and plug it in and use it at the settings that it comes pre-configured to, which is what I tend to do, and which is what was done here. So it was on the default custom setting, which is 100% brightness, and I think about 50 or so percent. We'll use a little remote here, which is cool. And it is 70% contrast and 100% brightness. The brightness is probably overkill. This is what we tested out to show the out-of-box experience. So it's 100% of sRGB, 70% of Adobe RGB. So again, fine for home users, consumers. If you're a prosumer, if you're professional, you're probably going to want something else, but again, you probably already knew that. Tonal response tracks really close to a gamma of 2.2 and measures at a 2.3. There is the gray ramp. Brightness and contrast. A brightness of 0% is really meaningless. So at 25% and above, we have pretty consistent contrast of 750 to 780 to 1. The white point is really consistent at 11,500 to 11,700. Again, that's not the gold standard of 6,500, but we have consistency here. And then the brightness ranges from 103.5 to 375. So roughly, with easy rounding, 105 nits to 375. So the OSD settings that it offers, which the custom is the default, that's a white point of 11,700. Warm is 7,000. Medium is 8,000. Cool is 10,000. Warm is probably the better setting to have done this testing at, because it's closer to that gold standard of the 6500 Kelvin white point for web and print and press and all of those things. But that doesn't seem to be where monitor manufacturers are actually setting their defaults and their out of the box configurations. The Dell I looked at, the Dell 43, this one, the other monitors that I've had, some LGs, and some other Dells, all seem to go for this wider than white or wider than standard default, maybe because it's more pleasing or because it looks brighter or whatever. So there does seem to be a disconnect with what industry standards are with regards to white point and accuracy and what manufacturers are using, at least for out-of-the-box settings. So from a uniformity perspective, let me scroll back to the top. Okay, single take here. So from a color uniformity perspective, we see the 0 point is actually here in the lower right-hand corner at 100% brightness, which again is probably a bad setting. The dark spot, or the low point, is here in the bottom middle. And things, we have some moderate spots here in the upper left and right. As we turn the brightness down to 83%, we still see that sort of Y pattern of the top left and right and the bottom middle. But then as we get to brightness of 67% and 50%, it evens out and we get a lot more consistency in the uniformity at 67% and 50% brightness. Luminance uniformity, we have some dark spots in general across the top, and then sort of across the bottom as well. Heavily or more heavily leveraged here on the right side. Again, this is 100% brightness, and as we reduce the brightness, we see the consistency level out and be more consistent, for lack of a better term. So we get a greater luminance uniformity as you go to 83 to 67 to 50% brightness. This is probably where most people will be, or should be, on the brightness or end of 67 to 50%. On other monitors, when I've done the actual calibration, the brightness recommendations are very much on the low end. So you can calibrate the monitor and then adjust the brightness. But as you range from that 50 to say 75% brightness, it certainly looks better from both a luminance uniformity and a color uniformity perspective than at 100%. Color accuracy, it's all really low and all really consistent except for this 1F blue, which this seems to be the one color that blows everything out on every monitor that I've tested before. I'm just at a handful of monitors, but this is the absolute one standout. The minimum is a 0.33, the max is a 6.4, and the average is a 1.29 or 1.3. So a really good rating overall, except for that one. If we look at the overall monitor rating, we get a 3.5 pucks. You can see on there in the bottom row, which is what the Dell got. But if we dig into it a little bit, the one detriment here is the white point, which was also the detriment on the Dell. I think that's more a function of the preset we tested at and not the actual panel performance. If we'd have tested at the warm or closer to that 6500 gold standard, I would bet that that setting would go up, and we will do that in our full review. But the luminance uniformity and the color uniformity are much better here than on the Dell. So at $300 less on a price point, you're getting a better performance in the individual segments overall, even though the overall rating itself looks the same. So going to run through some OSD things here and some features here real quick. I try to get out of this as quickly as we can. So when you hit the menu on the remote, again, a very a cool thing. Let me look at that real quick. So a little tangent. So you get a power and input. You get volume, mute, and brightness. This segment here is really around just controlling the OSD. You get the game mode, the picture mode, choosing the picture-by-picture, picture-in-picture options, full screen, which is swapping between one input on the PvP or the VIP modes in zooming it in and out or swapping it between full screen. But this is the one that really is interesting to me or really attractive is the audio select. So between adjusting the volume, audio selecting between one of the inputs on the PVP or the PIP is probably what I will do most often, and be most happy not to have to dig through the OSD to do. So this little remote here, which I'm sure didn't add a lot of cost, really, in my opinion, adds a lot of value here to this price point, and really makes the unit much more attractive than its Dell counterpart. So, looking here, you can see the defaults. So the first set of settings is the quick settings, brightness at 100%, contrast at 70. Inputs, you can see what's selected, which is DisplayPort. You can see it's the active sound source by the speaker icon. And then we go to the input list. You can see the full list there, the 4 HDMIs, the USB, Type-C, and the DisplayPort. The aspect ratio, we have full wide, which is to fill the screen. The original, you can see it's rethinking here. And then 1:1. I had some issues on the Dell when I was using custom aspect ratios, particularly on The Witcher 3, which is the 3D game. I didn't experience it on Pillars of Eternity, and I thought maybe it was game dependent. But I think here having the real solid support for the original aspect ratio and the 1:1 pixel formatting is going to help ensure that if you do an ultra wide custom resolution on here, which I think is a real attractive option and a real value add thing to do, it's going to help preserve the aspect ratio of all games, including 3D ones, not just 2D ones. That's an assumption that I'm making, and we'll test that going forward. We have the picture-by-picture and picture-in-picture modes. You can see all the variables there. You do see that we have a picture-by-picture size of medium, which indicates that there's probably a small and a large, which is another plus over the Dell. We'll have a transparency level of the picture-by-picture or the picture-in-picture option probably. So even if you're watching a newscast or a video or some sort of thing, or maybe YouTube videos on top of something else, you'll be able to see through that video to manipulate windows on your main option there. And then you have the input or the option there for what is the sound out. So to be able to pick between the main and the picture in picture that easily is pretty good, or whatever picture by picture. So for picture mode, we've got here custom reader, photo, cinema, darkroom, and a whole bunch of stuff. I don't know what the various differences are, but hey, there's options there. Picture adjust, you can adjust the brightness, the contrast, and sharpness. DFC here is an automatic brightness adjustment according to the screen. We'll see what that does or how it works. Game adjustment is a response time in black stabilizer thing. Like color adjustment, you can come in here and you can adjust the gamma. There's 4 modes, but there's no real readable label as to what that means. Color temp, you have the custom warm, cool, and medium. You can adjust the red, green, blue. If you go 6 color, you can adjust the hue and saturation for red, green, blue, cyan, magenta, and yellow. So a bit of fine detail there. You can do a reset. And then here, in the general, a couple of things to note is for sound optimizer, it has different options here for whether you're using a stand or a wall mount. So we'll see what that does once I wall mount my unit. And then it has an option here for enabling DisplayPort 1.2. And I don't know what that means. It's probably a holdover from other OSDs and firmwares from other displays, because it generally deals with MST, multi-stream transport, which is daisy chaining, having a DisplayPort input and a DisplayPort output on your monitor. And because I don't think this has a DisplayPort output, I don't remember seeing one. I'm not sure why it's here. It's again, it's probably just a holdover from something else, but it's enabled and we'll leave it as such. So there's a lot to like about this monitor at a very, very, very first look. The performance is good. In general, it has the same 3.5 out of 5 rating on the Spyder software that the Dell does. Trying to account for the white point performance and what that means and how that's impacting the score, I do think this panel shows better performance in general. When you look at the subcategories like luminance uniformity and color uniformity, I also think that the LG panel is going to provide some better scaling options with its items here for original aspect ratio and 1:1 scaling. 1:1 and original aspect are really things that we've looked for in the past that are very helpful when using custom resolutions or custom aspect ratios. The one negative, the one thing that I wish that was here that's not, is the lack of FreeSync. So this was originally billed in its press releases and announcements as having FreeSync, and LG has supported FreeSync very consistently, but it's not here, and I'm not sure why. It doesn't really make sense. Adaptive sync, which is what FreeSync is part of the DisplayPort standard. It's part of it's part of the VESA DisplayPort standard, and I don't know why they didn't include it and why they wouldn't have. And that really doesn't make sense to me. I've been using a Radeon Fury X. I've kind of been in the AMD camp a little bit because I like their stance towards open source software, FreeSync, and some of their other technologies, and they've also supported us in the WHDF and partnered with us better than NVIDIA has. So I will own up and cop to a little bit of bias there, even when we haven't been doing as much benchmarking in reviews of GPUs and things. AMD has still held a line of communication open with us and had easy access to their people, even if we weren't on the list for product and product reviews. We had a longer relationship with NVIDIA and had been dealing with them further back in history, but it seems that when they didn't have a use for us or a need for the forum and our expertise in a number of areas, then not only was product not forthcoming, which many review sites get product for reviews, but a lot of the connections and lines of communication dried up as well. So we're going to gravitate towards people who work with us and who help us do what we want to do here to serve the community. So I guess here in recent years, I've personally gravitated towards AMD for those things when I've bought cards for my own personal use. I was really excited to marry up FreeSync here with the Radeon Fury X I have, and the Vega RX that's forthcoming. Even if the Vega RX wasn't the be-all end-all performance king, hopefully AMD was hitting the price performance ratio good, and hopefully they will. But if I'm not getting that benefit of FreeSync, then that leaves open more for me potentially looking at the NVIDIA side of the camp for GPUs. And while that I might say that's unfortunate because it would just be a shift in climate or a shift in opinion or position, not having that FreeSync feature here really does make a play into my GPU choice in the future. And so I don't know why LG didn't include it. I wish they had, but we'll see going forward. Maybe that's something a firmware can do. I kind of doubt it. But that's my one real disappointment so far, is that FreeSync is not here. But given that it's not in the Dell either, the panel, the price, the performance, the LG is really the hands-down winner versus its Dell counterpart. So for those looking to buy, the LG is my choice over the Dell, hands down.